Welcome to J is for Justice podcast. If live breaking news and following true crime is your thing, then please consider subscribing to my channel. And if you like what you see in my videos, please consider giving them a thumbs up. Is this thing on? Welcome to J is for Justice, everyone. I want to thank y'all for being here today and all the moderators that are here. We have a very special Friday show today. I am really excited about this, and the moderators are sharing links and information on this book that we're going to talk about in just a minute here. Yes, thank you guys, and make sure that you hit that thumbs up as I welcome Mr. Blum to our panel.
Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon to you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. I look forward to the conversation.
Yes, as well. So do I. Am I saying your last name right? Because I've heard it pronounced Bloom and Blum.
It's actually Bloom.
It's Bloom. I've been saying it wrong, so I apologize, but I will change.
I've gotten used to that.
Yeah. I've heard it on podcasts both ways, and I'm like, I don't know which one it is. I've been saying Blum, so I'm just going to go with it.
They say worse things about me, so I can put up with the mispronunciation of my name.
Yeah, I've seen some of the things that people have been saying about you. Your book has become a little controversial.
Yes, it has. This is a case. That's why the case is so fascinating to people. There are many different sides, many different aspects, and the search for truth is at this stage the search for different hypotheses. You're trying to work your way out to what really happened. I give my view. I ground it in the facts as I uncovered them. Other people are entitled to their opinion. I think this is one case when even there's a trial, there's going to be obviously a verdict, but then the verdict will be disputed for years and years to come. There are no easy answers in this case. And as I always like to say about it, most dramatically, there are no real survivors in this case. I mean, everyone involved, everyone who it touched is a victim.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Do you think that it's been, the conspiracies have been out of control because of the gag order that's in place?
I think you raise a very relevant point. The gag order is way extreme. When there's a gag order, it prevents the free flow of information. If you can't get the information from authorities like the lawyers involved, from the law enforcement people, then there's a vacuum. And this vacuum is going to be filled with whatever is out there. And a lot of fatuous, often malicious information is going to try to fill this vacuum. And I think, the gag order is a mistake, but the mistake is further exacerbated by the delay of the trial. It just drags us on and on and on. And these two pernicious aspects of the case at this point, the gag order and the trial delay, work hand in hand to make this almost frenzy of people becoming on one side or the other and have so much invested in this case so that a civilized discussion almost seems impossible.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? I know the lawyers and the officials are gagged, but what about the family being gagged? The families being gagged as well. Have you seen that in the past?
Well, the families are not so much gagged as they're reluctant to speak. They have their own reasons for this. There are other projects, no doubt, in the work besides my book. I thought now was the time to try to get the story out there, to lay out a story which I believe has a beginning, a middle, and an end up to this point, the suspect and the preparation for the trial. And also the subtitle of the book, the book title is When the Night Comes Falling In. The subtitle is A Requiem for the Idaho Student Murders. And by that I mean I wanted to do something that memorializes these students. I wanted to do something that honors their lives. Because that's ultimately the largest tragedy of this entire event, the lives that were ended so abruptly. I always think of Xana at her high school graduation. She wore a mortarboard, and underneath it said, "For the lives I will change. For the lives I will change." And now Xana will never get that opportunity. Another, and neither will the other young people who were killed. And that's the horror of this story.
I agree. I agree. And I love how you bring up the victims in this. It's not just about the crime itself, but how their lives were tragically taken in the prime of their lives. I mean, from all the videos we've seen and the body cam and the photos, they were living their best lives at that moment.
I mean, there's a line from the poet William Blake, exuberance is beauty. And I didn't quite understand it until I saw those videos of these people. There's something very beautiful, very touching when you see the videos, even the police body cam videos of the parties they were having. That exuberance is beauty. And the irony, or the horrible irony, is I believe that beauty is what incited the killer. I think that inflamed his feeling that he was an outsider, and he saw their youthfulness, their ebullience, their beauty as a constant rebuke to the life that he was mired in.
Yeah, before we get into more of like the motive or the reason that you think this happened, I wouldn't mind if you told everybody a little bit about your background and your experience in journalism because a lot of people haven't heard about you until this, big case.
They haven't? No.
Well, I
Well,
don't think they know your extensive,
no,
background that you are a reliable journalist. You're not
when
just someone
I
who came
when
out
I
of
got
the
when I got out of college, graduate school, actually, I went off to the Village Voice. I was a reporter there for a couple of years. Then the New York Times hired me as an investigative reporter. I was there for about 12 to 14 years, nominated for 2 Pulitzer Prizes, won a bunch of awards. Then I went on to write for Vanity Fair and wrote also 16 books, many of them bestsellers. So I've been doing this, earning my keep as a writer, as a journalist, knocking on doors, writing sentences for my entire adult life.
Wow. That's amazing. So like a lot of the naysayers I think don't maybe realize you've been in the game for a long time. But how do you stay, above board, ethical while you investigate cases, especially one as big as this? How do you maintain ethical standards and being objective at the same time when writing a book like this?
Well, I'm not sure objectivity is necessary. What is necessary is a sort of truthfulness. I adhere to the Times standards. If I quote someone in my work, in the remarks or in quotation marks, I have that quote in my notebook. I try to get the facts as best as I can. Also, at the same time, I realize, this is journalism. This is a breaking story. This is not history. I am trying to make the most accurate account as I write it now. But my primary object is I tell true stories. All my books have been about different topics. My reportings are different topics, but I always try to create a narrative. I want people to get involved in the story. I want the people involved who are the characters in the story to come alive on the page. I want this to be a compelling, dramatic read. And one of the reasons why I liked writing about this story, it fitted all those criteria, that here was an exciting story that I could tell. And I had such complex characters, from the victims to the suspects to the family members, all coming together in this seemingly idyllic college town.
Well, I have to say that I read all of your airmail articles and I posted them on my YouTube and I really enjoyed how you told the story. Is your book, I haven't read it yet, is it kind of those articles put together but more detail added?
Well, it has the same sort of style as those articles. I said, a driving narrative, but my literary conceit. This doesn't seem too pretentious. I tried to. Homer's Odyssey is about a trip. Odysseus' trip back home. I used the trip of Michael and Bryan Kohberger to anchor this book. There, in the Odyssey, the trip takes 10 years. Here it's 5 days, but so much goes on in that trip, and it's the focal point of my narrative. And I try to tell this entire story to where it is up to this point before the trial, through that trip, and how that affects so many characters involved in this story.
That's really interesting. I'm glad you let everybody know that hasn't read it yet that it is based on, Bryan and his dad, like the basis of it, because a lot of us wonder a lot about that trip, a lot about Bryan's dad and why he was driving with him in the first place. So that's really interesting
I
to
mean,
me.
and it's coming out. This was not the first place, actually. He was driving with him. This is the second place. When Bryan first went out to the University of Washington State University that summer, the father felt it necessary to make that trip too. Here he is, 68 years old. They have financial problems. He was a janitor. He'd gone bankrupt twice. Yet he feels he needs to be with his 28-year-old son as his 28-year-old son starts a new life. And this is not a young college kid. This is someone who's going to be teaching college kids. From the get-go, Michael Kohberger believed or felt his son had problems. The first thing he does when he gets to Washington State is Michael Kohberger, this is in August or July, he sees a neighbor of Bryan and says, my son has a hard time meeting people. Can you help him out? And that neighbor kindly invites him to a pool party in Moscow. And that's Bryan's first trip to Moscow.
I have a question about that pool party, and you may or may not know, but you did I watched you on Law and Crime, and you talked about the girls in the bathing suits at the pool party that he asked for their number. They gave it to him. They never got calls from Bryan, but they received some hangups that in hindsight, they thought, maybe that was him. Were there any, as to your knowledge, any of the victims, were they at that pool party or did they have anything? Were they there at some point? Do you know that?
You're asking a question that the authorities have tried to answer. They have gathered, particularly after I wrote about it in Airmail for the first time, they tried to gather all the videos. Originally, they had set up an office on the Washington State University campus, and they asked people about the pool party. And they never, I go into this in the book a bit, they never got a clear video that showed the girls. No one can remember their being there, but there are other people involved in the case that they were also looking at the pool party. They were trying to make connections. To this day, the prosecution and the defense, the one thing they agree on, and they've said this in open court, that there is no interaction, either verbal or on social media, with Bryan Kohberger and any of the victims that they can find to this date. So anything you've read about that previously that documents a social media following or said they've seen people talking to them, the prosecution and defense know nothing about this.
Yeah, and that I heard that and I was kind of stunned. And when I did one of your readings, I can't remember exactly which one it was. When you spoke about, him kind of you put a visual out there of him on Instagram, kind of scrolling through the girls' pictures of looking at all of these girls that he can't have, so to speak, wishing he had that life or he was in that crowd or, whatever was going on in his mind. Do you think that he was just generally looking, or do you think that he was actually looking at them? I mean, based on what you found out.
I think ultimately, and how this moved from being a person with having a difficult, complicated life who lived in a psychological terrain that was, hazardous to say the best. How it moved from that is that he encountered one of the victims, I believe Maddie Mogan, at arguably the Mad Greek restaurant in downtown Moscow. He didn't have to say a word to her. He didn't have to have any kind of exchange with her. He was a man who lived by obsessions. Look at his heroin addiction, the way he lost 100 and some odd pounds, the way he shaped his body into a fortress. Obsessions came easily to him. And for some reason, Maddie, her blonde good looks, her exuberance, her vivaciousness, whatever struck a chord in him, and he became fixated on her. And then the fact that he could not, just the way he couldn't talk to the two women at the pool party, take it further, that he was excluded from this world. It was a constant rebuke to him. And this rebuke, I believe, ate away at him, ate away. Even though he tried to fight where it was taking him, it ultimately led to he entered that house not to kill indiscriminately, but to kill, I believe, Maddie and everyone else was sadly collateral damage.
So you think he only planned on one victim then, and it got
I,
out of control?
I believe here's how the night went down.
Mhm,
Uh, in the sense, it's been written that when the car circles the house 3 times, comes and goes away, he's
mhm.
stalking the house. I don't accept that. I contend, and this is what I've discussed with law enforcement sources, whatever, and this is what I've come to believe. He was trying to find the will. He was trying to take all his unreconciled emotions and make them into a course of action. And he was also fighting against these demons too. He would drive there and then pull himself away, drive off, think he's never going to return. You're never going to have that cigarette or do that one thing you want to do, but you wind up always having that one more drink. He couldn't pull himself away. He was pulled back as if by a magnetic force until he finally finds the will, finds the strength of Hercules, in effect, to turn off the ignition and to walk down that icy slope and with a knife in his hand and go to the back kitchen door. By this point, only then is he committed to doing the deed that he's been thinking about in his mind. When he enters the house on the second floor through the kitchen sliding door, which is open, he makes his way in. There are 2 bedrooms, we all know, on the second floor. He could have gone into Dylan's. He could have gone into Xana's. He doesn't. Instead, he goes up that narrow staircase, makes his way up to the top of the staircase. Oh, there are 2 bedrooms on the top of this floor, too. He opens the door and they're to Maddie's bedroom because this is whom he's looking for. And he finds, to his surprise, that there's not one woman there, but 2. And he now has to deal with this. And that's why I think the wounds to Kaylee are so much more vicious than the wounds to Maddie. Maddie, he takes care of, but Kaylee is fighting back. She's fighting back like a tiger, and he's enraged that he has to deal with this too. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't planned for this.
So he's mad.
Yeah, he's
His
his plan
plan.
has gone awry, and that's why in this anger and madness and unanticipated killing that he has to make, he leaves a knife sheath behind. Uh, and then when the second murder is done, finally, and not finally, it all happens extremely quickly, amazingly quickly to me. He goes down the staircase, and there is Ethan to confront him. Zaina has already said there's someone here. They've heard noises. Ethan is 6'4". He's an athlete. He's a wonderful young man, and yet he dies very quickly. And then the killer approaches Zaina, and the killer says, "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," which, of course, is a lie. Zaina fights back as best she can. According to people who've been familiar with the autopsy, there's a knife wound right through her hand. She put up her hand in self-defense, and she's killed. Then he exits the room and he's about to leave the house, make his way. He's locked. He's crossed over into this world of just thinking about being a killer to actually becoming one. He's now entered a new reality, and he's locked in this reality. And at the same time, as we all know, Dylan emerges from her room, sees this man in black with a black mask, bushy eyebrows, and she's in, it's put in the police affidavit, I think, a stage of fright, a paralyzed fear.
Frozen shock. Yeah.
Frozen shock, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She can't speak, and her inability, I believe, to speak is what saves her life. Because if she had let out a scream, if she had tried to grab him at anything, she would have pulled him from the state he was in. She would have shattered his armory of hate, and he would have turned towards her, and she would have been another victim. It's her silence, it's her frozen shock, her frozen state that saves her life, and the killer then exits the house. I believe that's what's happened in part that night.
Wow. I mean, it all makes sense. And it's a lot of, the same theories that we've thrown around here. Um, what do you, I mean, I know Dylan and, the poor girl has gotten so much negative, just horrible accusations towards her online. And it just makes me sick. Now, when you say, she was quiet, do you think she realized what happened and like kind of retreated and was just like, what, just like frozen?
Realization is a complex word. The way, I think what she underwent at that moment was really like a state of shock. It's hard to make a reasonable explanation for her behavior because it wasn't a reasonable moment. You can't apply common sense logic to it. I believe that what was happening was just too large for her to envelop. It was too large for her to deal with. And she just retreated into this sort of shell, and the killer left. And again, it's a conundrum, but 8 hours pass before anyone is alerted. And then the police aren't alerted, but they call out for friends who come over and finally alert the police. This makes the case so interesting, so filled with perplexities, but it's not a rational time. There's nothing rational or reasonable about killing 4 young students, and you're not going to find an explanation that makes sense. If you saw this scenario, on a TV show or whatever, you think it doesn't make sense. It's absurd. But life is a bit more complicated and a bit more subtle.
Yeah. It going back to Bryan and him going in the house and have it takes a lot of courage, like you said, to actually walk into someone's home not knowing really what you're going to encounter once you get in there. I mean, you have a plan in your head, but anything can send that awry, like you said. Do you think that he's done anything like this or anything criminal prior to just getting the gumption to go and walk into a dark home?
I don't think so. I think his state that night, if Koberger was the assailant, was not a really reasonable one. He was concerned more about what was going on inside his own head, if he could just save himself from becoming the killer that he felt he had to be. Why do I say this? Well, look what was happening at the house that night. If he had noticed or paid attention at any time he was driving by all the cars parked in front, he would have thought, well, there are too many people here. Why would I go into this house? This is not the night to do it. And then if he'd seen the 4 a.m. DoorDash, which he might have even crossed paths with the DoorDash driver, but he was locked in his own world. He was oblivious to this. But this was probably the worst possible time to enter that house because there are so many people there, and there'd just been a DoorDash driver, so that people were up. You couldn't really sneak in.
Right. So why would he go for it? Just because he had built himself up?
He was oblivious to all these extraneous events, what was going on, what was clear to him.
So focused on what he was in his head, do.
And it took him this long journey, those 3 times, which might have been the length of 3 lifetimes in his own mind, to finally find the will to cross over into this unreal world of a killer. and that's what he was, these demons swirling around, and that's what he was fighting. That's what he was coming to terms with, and that's what his mind was fixed on. That's what I believe.
And you went to Pennsylvania as well and did some researching, right?
I spent a good deal of time in Pennsylvania, maybe
You did.
several trips. Yeah.
Did
Uh,
you get a lot of useful information out of those trips?
I think I give a good sense of some of Bryan's friends, associates in Pennsylvania, of his time at DeSalle. I think I made connections that allowed me to give in never before reported detail what really went on between Bryan and his father on that trip across country, what happened on the night when the police moved in to make the arrest. I think I was able to uncover the facts that allow me to tell those events with, I
I
hope.
had to laugh at I had to laugh at that part when you described like the SWAT team pulling up to his neighborhood and none of them had the code.
Right.
So
When you I mean, it's also the whole idea that there's a guard boom in front of this community. The
yeah,
community had grander days. It was once sort of summer homes. Now it's people living all year round, trying to stay away from New York, basically, and finding work in Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania doesn't really have a SWAT team. They have something much even more sophisticated. It's a special emergency response team, and they are loaded for bear. And when they go in for a dynamic entry, these are tough, dangerous guys. And suddenly they pull up to the entrance of this community, and they don't have the code to get in. And these guys don't want to take no for an answer. They want to go smashing through. They have these
right.
specially outfitted Ford vans, and there are two state police cars behind these vans, and they're going to go in really like an invading army. But cooler heads prevail, and they finally track down someone to give them the code, and they
Yeah.
go this winding community road. They very furtively park away from the house, make their way in the darkness to the house, and break in, and they smash windows, stun grenades. They get inside, and they find this guy in the kitchen in his boxer shorts, putting his garbage into little plastic Ziploc bags.
With gloves on, right?
Yes, it's he was Bryan Kohberger. I believe, and the facts would seem to substantiate this. He was going to beat this case. He was never going to be identified, even though he had lost his job and he wasn't fully aware of it yet at Washington State University. He believed he was going to be able to go back. All the problems he had with the school administration, he was going to be able to argue his case, and he would resume teaching students for the new term in January.
Do you think that his dad knew that there was problems at work?
Well, a large part of the book is, I said, that trip across country. And in that trip across country, his father comes out there, and his father, even before he gets off the plane, I mean, the whole world is looking for someone who killed 4 people 10 miles away from their very troubled son that goes to school. The son is so troubled that the father wants to go out and check on him when he first registers at school and now. And then the police have issued a BOLO, be on the lookout alert, for a white Hyundai Elantra. And their son just happens to be driving a white Hyundai Elantra. And he's sitting shoulder to shoulder in this white Hyundai Elantra with his son. And he's realizing that his son's mood is volatile, to say the least. And he's going on this journey, and each journey is in his mind is as if the father is following footsteps. And these footsteps are all leading him to the conclusion that, could my son be involved in this? And it's a destination he doesn't want to arrive at. And then two things happen that make it hard for the father to avoid this conclusion. The first is the shooting that day at Washington State University. We all know there was that veteran
Yeah.
who took a couple of students hostage, and the list of students out. The Washington State SWAT team still goes in, and they kill the guy. And the father finds out about that, and that just exacerbates the father's concerns about the malevolent forces that are let loose in the West and his son has been locked into. And then all this is coming to a head in his mind, and they're driving along in Indiana, police sirens, flashing lights, and they've got to pull over, and his father doesn't know. His first thought is, this is it. Everything I've been thinking about as being true is going to be proven true, and the worst is possible, but turns out just to be a traffic stop. The father breathes a sigh of relief, and he thinks, well, maybe I was wrong. 9 minutes later, the same thing happens again. More flashing lights, and pulls over, and by now the father, and each time the father blurts out, for no apparent reason, about the shooting that day at Washington State University. And clearly it's giving a foundation to all his thoughts about what's going on. Clearly it's testimony to his belief that something very rotten is gone. He can't keep it in. He blurts it out. And it's a very revelatory statement about the seething forces going on in his mind. And as the trip continues, they get closer and closer to Pennsylvania, the father is beginning to think the unthinkable. Oh my gosh, my son's a killer. He's not there yet. Gets home. It's a family Christmas holiday. Bryan's sisters are there. One of them is a psychologist, a family psychologist, and she sees her brother cleaning meticulously, vacuuming, this white Hyundai Elantra. And she read the papers. The police are looking for a white Hyundai Elantra. And then she sees him taking his garbage, putting it into plastic bags, and walking down the house and putting it not in the garbage pail that belongs to the house, but into a neighbor's garbage can. And she begins, to put two and two together, and she confronts the father. And she says, in effect, Dad, I think we might have a problem, a matter of concern with Bryan. And at this point, the father, hearing this sort of affirmation of where all his thoughts have been going, all he can do is just walk off in silence. He can't, as a father, he can't go there. He's another victim. And of course, there is an irony and a coda to this that's ironic and almost out of a Greek tragedy. The father who refuses to make this identification to get to this final understanding that his son could be the killer. Well, it's the father's DNA. When they examine the knife sheath, the DNA doesn't tie to Bryan Kohberger. The DNA ties to the father, and that's how they find Bryan Kohberger, through the father's DNA. So the father, as if a character in a Greek drama was trying to escape his fate, is pulled back in. He can't get away.
Yeah, he's tied right into it.
And that's the sort of drama, and that's the narrative largely that I tell in When the Night Comes Falling.
Were you able to get any any idea of the family dynamics at home, prior to Bryan moving?
Yeah, I think I described.
You go into that?
Some detail in the book about Bryan's, troubled childhood, his problem with his father, for example. He loved his father, but at the same time he hated him. There's all this ambivalence, and it tears him apart. He talks about this, how I feel so guilty for hating my father because he's a fine man, but I can't help it. And his mother is very sympathetic. I mean, I think, again, I keep on repeating this, the Kohbergers, the family, are victims in this too. It's a family torn apart by a son who is their progeny, and yet it might as well have come from a different world.
I don't know how much more time you have, but I have one more question to piggyback off of that. Were you able to speak with any distant relatives of the Kohbergers, and did those conversations give you any insight to the book?
Well, you raise an important point. What I tried to do because of the gag order is sort of do what the FBI did, but in reverse. The FBI built a family tree that led them to the Bryan Kohberger. I started with Bryan Kohberger and worked my way back on this family tree, did some research so I could find relatives that were close to the family, who would have knowledge of the family and conversations. And they gave me insight and told me of conversations that allowed me to flesh out the scenes I create in the book.
Nice. Well, that's good to know. So I heard you mention that you did speak with some distant relatives, I think.
Yeah.
No one in particular, but um it is a really smart strategy. Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book. I know several of my viewers have already bought the book and are currently reading it. Um
I mean, the book is, I will say, and modestly, the book is doing very well. It's a big bestseller on Amazon.
Yay.
And I think people are everyone has different opinions about theories, that. But I think people are enjoying the suspenseful read, the compelling read. They find the narrative very affecting, and that's very gratifying to me as a writer.
Oh, there is one other question. When you were in Pennsylvania, did you, or maybe if this is in the book, just say it's in the book, but we heard briefly in the news that Bryan's parents attended grand jury hearings for another case out in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that was a dead end.
It
That
was.
was so that's one of these things with the gag orders, and there's lots of theories and lots of juicy theories out there, but that one was a dead end. And what I try to keep to the book and keep to the narrative, what I can substantiate and what is relevant to this tale as we know it up to this date.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you again for joining us at J is for Justice today. It was an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you
I
for
was
speaking
so
about
nervous to have you. I don't get nervous very often, and I was nervous today.
Well,
But
it's pretty easy, huh?
yes, you were very, very
No,
nice
you were
to talk
fun.
to.
So thank you very much, and so were you. I appreciate the
Yeah,
time.
I'd love to have you on again, and maybe we
Good.
can chit
I'd
chat
love to
more about
speak
this
after you
case.
read the book. I hope you'll enjoy the book. It's a good, quick,
Absolutely.
compelling read.
I would love to speak after I read it. That'd be great.
Great.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Mr. Bloom. You have
All
a
right.
great afternoon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye. Well, you guys, I thought that was an amazing interview, and now I've got to get used to saying Bloom instead of Blum. But I mean, I'm excited to read the book, and I hope that you guys understand. I know, like he said, a lot of people have theories on this case. You have, you know, you've got from drug deals to, this, that, the other. And I think he kind of touches on all of those things that came up in his investigation. So I hope you'll join me tonight. I am live again tonight at 8 p.m. We have a special Friday, and thank you so much for the super chats that came in during the stream. I was trying not to look at chat. I wanted to focus. So thank you for joining this afternoon. It's a quick Friday, but I'm making up for it later. We're going to be talking about Uncle Taco. Who's Uncle Taco? Sebastian Rogers' Uncle Taco was on a live stream today, and we need to discuss it. So we will do that. In the meantime, let's dance it out. Go buy that book, When the Night Comes Falling, by Howard Bloom. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening until I see you later. We're going to dance it out. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
I don't give a damn. I don't really care about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. You talk way too much. I have heard enough about you and your problems. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn. Damn, damn. I don't give a damn. Damn, damn. I don't give a damn. Damn, damn. I don't give a damn. You wanna be with me. You wanna feel something real, but I'm feeling differently.